Hey guys, so I pretty much failed at making one video each month like I had hoped, but yeah, new year, new me, right? Anyway, I haven't really done as much as I wanted to, so I'm trying to work on game stuff at least a bit each day. Like one of my other games is this top-down shooter detective thing. There's not much to look at besides basic weapons and movement, but for some reason I felt like working on it again after spending some time trying to figure out what to do with one of my other games. I had a hard time trying to figure out how to make the whole game work, so I came to the conclusion that I should just focus on smaller stuff rather than trying to figure out the whole game in one go. I know this sounds pretty obvious since it's something you do all the time while working on code, but for some reason I never thought of doing the same thing with the game design. Another reason why I wanted to work on this game instead of the other one was because there's a lot of rules and restrictions, like having constant room size, specific rules that all rooms have to follow, and mainly because there's just so many rooms that need to be made. So instead I wanted to work on something that's, well, slightly less limiting. Anyway, there's a lot to do on this game just like all the other ones, but since it's supposed to have a lot of characters and only has currently one placeholder model for that, I felt like adding a few more just because, well, having something that looks a bit more like a character is a whole lot more interesting than, well, cubes. I wanted to make something that matches the style of the existing one, so I wrote down some points after having a closer look at it. So I used the drawing app on my phone to do some sketches that I could use as a background for the models, mainly because otherwise I just always end up adding more details than I really want, and this way I have something visual to stick to. I used Blender a few times before, so I had a fairly good idea of what to do besides, well, googling all the shortcuts and stuff. Mainly since I knew what I was aiming for, so it was mostly just about moving around cubes and fiddling with them until it looks kind of like a character. It took around 1 hour to make each one of those, but that's mostly because I'm just fiddling around with them until they look right to me. I know it's kind of a waste of time, but I will most likely just end up using those as a base for the finished model, so I might as well work on something that is kind of, well, acceptable. Which is why I also zoom out in Blender to get a better idea of how it might look in Unity and if I should change anything, in case it's too generic or not recognizable from a distance. It's kind of about the shape and size and the whole silhouette so that you don't confuse one character for another, at least not from a distance. I did like 3 in total, just to have a bit of variety, but I wasn't too happy with the last one. It's supposed to be kind of a bird, but it just looks super generic to me. Then I did some rings, which also take like around 1 hour each. It's basically about creating bones that will deform the mesh, attaching them to the model, making sure that it bends and stretches the way you want it. Normally we would probably make a more detailed ring, just so it's easier to make animations, but since all of this is just placeholder stuff, I decided to just go with the bare minimum. I know it's not much, but at least I'm doing something, so I'm fairly happy about that. After all that, I created some small animations to try out in Unity. It took a bit of time to figure out all the things I need to set up for the animations to play correctly, but at the end I basically had what I needed, 2 animations playing at once. Also, the last thing I did on the other game was to write a test so that I could fix a small issue with one of the scripts. There's basically a problem where spamming mouse buttons would create cubes in places where it should be impossible. It was too difficult to reproduce the issue myself constantly all the time, so I needed some kind of test that could spam mouse buttons faster than I could. So I did what I normally do, checked the internet, and eventually I found myself with a test that spams mouse buttons faster than any human could. It was good enough to get the issue fixed, but in general the test itself could have been better. But yeah, the issue is fixed, so not really relevant anymore. Anyway, we'll see when the next video pops up.